Welcome, you're in the Pine Barrens. This is about a 107,000 acre area that exists in pretty much kind of the eastern half of Long Island. And I like to say, I think it's the greatest environmental accomplishment we've had on Long Island, preserving a landscape this large. So very quickly, the whole preservation of the Pine Barrens, I'm going to pick on Enrico and Peter because I know them probably best. Okay. Um, with the Pine Barrens Society at the time, back in the late 1970s, early 80s, a number of us that were really became interested, fascinated about the Pine Barrens, saw the trend of development that was occurring on the island and realized it had pretty much come up to like William Floyd Parkway, just a little bit west of William Floyd. And there's no reason to think that all of this wouldn't have been just washed over with suburban and commercial development, or not with some intervention. And so we created, naively thinking back then, we'll create this organization, we'll call it the Pine Barrens Society. Not a great name, but it's the only thing we came up with. And started to really try to foment public interest in the Pine Barrens. And that worked. And we got a number of important things, like the 1986 Open Space Program by Suffolk County Legislature, where they committed $65 million, which doesn't sound like a lot of money nowadays when you hear about trillions, but back then for a county, open space bond proposal, that $65 million open space bond, that provided a lot of money to buy some key parcels in the Pine Barrens. But the Pine Barrens wasn't preserved or saved. And by the early 1980s to mid 1980s, there were 242 separate subdivisions and site plans that were before the planning boards, respectively, in the towns of Brookhaven, Riverhead, and Southampton. If those were to have gone through, we would have absolutely decimated, made a Swiss cheese out of the Pine Barrens. So at that time, we started thinking about some more kind of comprehensive action. This is we're going to pick on Peter and Enrico. Make believe they're two developers, okay? And so Enrico owns this property here. It's not make believe, it's not Cranberry Bog. It's 100 acres that's been in Enrico's family for ages. He wants to develop it. And so what he would do is he based on SECRA, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, the major law that really requires disclosure of environmental impacts, a really important law in the state of New York. Enrico would submit his EIS because out here, the town of Southampton would say, okay, Enrico, you want to develop 100 acres with 50 homes. It's 2 acre zoning we're making, believe. Then you need to put together an EIS to talk about how to mitigate.
Golf course too.
You want a golf course too? He wants a golf course too.
Why not?
So Enrico prepares the EIS, gives it to the town of Southampton. And what does his EIS basically say? It's a 300-page document. It's all thick with these appendices that show the Long Island groundwater system and all this gobbledygook. The basic is that he's going to say, well, the 100 acres, 50 homes, there'll be some contamination. We're going to have septic systems and cesspools, but it's surrounded by all the wild land that pollution is going to be diluted entirely. No adverse impacts upon water quality or hydrology. Enrico's EIS also says, in terms of wildlife, there'll be some adverse impacts to wildlife, but the whippoorwills and box turtles that are found in this property will just move over because there's thousands of acres of undeveloped land. Well, Peter has 150 acres. His family did a little better. He has 150 acres next door. And he says the same exact thing. You see the disconnect. So we said, F that. You have a requirement, government. Sorry, I didn't take them. So the SECRA wasn't working. We said that based on SECRA, where there's cumulative impacts, you have to actually undertake a cumulative impact assessment. Make a super long story, complicated, expensive lawsuits. We filed our first suit in 1988 in local Supreme Court, and that's the lowest level of the court system in New York. And we said that there was a requirement pursuant to SECRA to undertake this cumulative impact assessment of kind of impacts that are tied together conceptually and geographically, what have you. Supreme Court said, nah. They ruled against the society. We immediately appealed that decision, and again, it was the Pine Barrens Society et al. Other environmental groups joined us, but the society led it. And it was against the three towns of Brookhaven, Riverhead, Southampton, and the county of Suffolk, because the county of Suffolk also has required, they approve subdivisions based on the Suffolk County Sanitary Code, basically what they call Article 6. So we appealed to the appellate division in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn overturned the Supreme Court decision, kind of slam dunked the Supreme Court language. If you read it, say no, the society's absolutely right. It was quite clear there is a cumulative impact assessment capability, and they met the test that you need to do this. The towns, with money funded by the development community, appealed to the State Court of Appeals, the highest court in New York State, up in Albany. So it went up there. The Court of Appeals reversed the appellate division, unbelievably to our chagrin. And what the court said, though, is the Pine Barrens Society has clearly demonstrated the regionally significant value of the Pine Barrens and this area, but don't ask the judiciary to do what really the legislature should do, the public deliberative body that comes up with laws and policies. Go, your fight, society, is with the legislature. Go with the legislature. So we immediately turned to the New York State legislature, and a super long story. In 1993, after several years of negotiating with development community in the towns, and I can tell you, I've always like to make this point, do you remember back in the Vietnam War, there was discussion, it took like a month with negotiations to argue about the shape of the negotiating table? Do you remember this? I remember this as a kid. I can't believe it. But there was they couldn't even agree on what the setting for the negotiations would be going to try to negotiate a settlement to the Vietnam War. Well, I know how that was with this. It was incredibly intense, difficult, but ultimately the skies opened up and we all finally just reached an agreement. In 1993, the state legislature passed the Pine Barrens Protection Act. That act does a few things that'll stop it at that point. The act put in place 7,000 acre area. Actually, it was about 102, but it's been expanded with pursuant amendments to the act, creating a 55,000 acre core preservation area where no development is allowed. 55,000. That's almost 100 square miles of land on Long Island where development's not allowed. And then about a 48,000 acre compatible growth area surrounding the core, in which development can occur, but it has to occur in fulfillment of certain land use standards that are sensitive. So even in that area, you can only clear like 40% of the land for the homes. You have to keep the forest largely intact. Other criteria dealing with water quality and contiguous habitat and so forth. So that was put in the 93 Act, and a commission, a 5-member commission, including the 3 supervisors of the towns, the county executive, and the governor of the state of New York, was created. And that commission was created to develop a comprehensive plan, which you can read to this day if you go online, the Pine Barrens Commission, Central Pine Barrens Commission. A very thick document that was prepared. That comprehensive management plan is what oversees the Pine Barrens to this day. And the commission meets on a monthly basis. They rotate where they're going around. And they actually review specific projects in the compatible growth area. And in very limited circumstances, very, very, like 1/10 to 1%, projects that may be in the core. Even though development's forbidden, there was an escape hatch that you could actually appeal to the commission for core development. Well, how do we get around the basic federal constitutional issue of the Fifth Amendment about taking somebody's property without just compensation? You can't do that. We would have lost in court, and in fact, there were 4 subsequent lawsuits brought challenging the act based on that provision. The law was upheld all 4 times because the state of New York provided about $50 million to buy land immediately, but most importantly, there's a Pine Barrens credit program that's established. So I'm going to pick on Mary Jean now, not pick anything, but Mary Jean is a property owner in a core. She actually got caught by the law. She cannot develop 100 acres. We can't just take the value of her land, right? So she has to receive just compensation for that. So in the act, there was a Pine Barrens credit program that was established that assigns a certain amount of fungible credits that have value. They're worth about $88,000 developer credit as of about a month ago. That $88,000. So she got 100 acres. Let's say that she's got 25 credits. 25 times 88. I won't do the math, but she's got several $1 million worth of credits. She can sell her credits on the open market to Brett, who's a developer back in Farmingville. Brett loves Friendly's ice cream. He loves their ice cream. Just loves it, right? So Brett wants to put in an ice cream parlor, Friendly's ice cream parlor, on Granny. I'm making it so long. On Granny Road, and he buys 2 or 3 credits from Mary Jean. That allows him to actually have several more seats based on the Suffolk County Sanitary Code. So he gets a better, more viable business by using credits that came from Mary Jean. So that's called a TDR, a Transfer of Development Rights Program. It's the most successful and largest TDR program in the United States ever, right here in the Pine Barrens. And there's the Pine Barrens credit people, the clearinghouse meets. I know the people quite well and chat with them. They're actually going to be having an auction pretty soon. So in that way, you're taking land that's got environmental value in what we call the sending area, and you're putting it you're transferring the development potential to a receiving area. Again, so transfer of development rights. It can be a very effective way to preserve landscapes that we care about. And it has been used throughout the country, but it's a centerpiece of the Pine Barrens Act here. So that's about a 30-year battle in about 10 minutes. Just ship. But